I was standing still in the hallway just outside our kitchen, unable to move, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. I'd come home earlier than usual that evening. I slipped in quietly through the side door because I'd forgotten my keys and had to grab the spare we kept tucked beneath the stupid little garden gnome in the yard. I wasn't trying to sneak up on anyone, but that's exactly what I did. That's when I heard my wife talking. She was on the phone and had no idea I was there. "I just can't stand him anymore, Helen," she said. "I really thought I could, but I can't. It's impossible." Margaret's voice sounded tight and strained, filled with something I'd never heard from her before. It was raw frustration mixed with something that came dangerously close to contempt. "Every morning it's the same," she went on. "Complaining. Negativity. He's never satisfied with anything." She paused, then sighed. "I try to be patient, but it's exhausting. It's draining me. I don't even know what to do anymore. 15 years of marriage. 2 kids. A house in the Portland suburbs. A perfect yard I'd designed with my own hands. Standing there, listening, it all suddenly felt like some kind of cruel punchline. How had I missed this? The warning signs had to be there. They must have been. But I'd either been too blind or too comfortable to see them. I stepped back slowly, barely breathing, careful not to make a sound or let the floorboards creak. My chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left nothing behind. I slipped out the same way I'd come in, got into my car, and drove off without any real destination. I don't remember the first few miles at all. My mind was empty, except for this strange sense of release washing over me. A quiet, unsettling thought crept in: if my being around made Margaret this unhappy, maybe she really would be better off without me. My name is Daniel Whitmore, and until that day, I truly believed I understood what happiness was. I'm 43 years old, and for the past 15 years I've worked as a landscape designer at a company called Green Vista, out in the suburbs of Portland. You know those glossy magazines with picture-perfect homes and flawless backyards on the cover? Yeah, that's my work. Though if I'm being honest, I'd been sick of designing artificial nature for wealthy clients for a long time. It didn't start that way. When I first joined Green Vista, I had big ideas. I wanted to build sustainable, natural spaces, yards that worked with the land instead of against it. I'd spend hours sketching designs that followed natural slopes and curves, using native plants that actually supported birds, insects, and local wildlife. But little by little, that idealism wore down. Rich clients didn't want ecosystems. They wanted lawns trimmed so perfectly they looked like green carpet. They wanted exotic plants that drank water like it was unlimited and needed constant attention. They weren't interested in nature, they wanted something to show off to the neighbors. And I gave it to them. I swallowed my objections, smiled like a professional, and told myself it was fine. The money was good, and my family needed it. Every compromise felt temporary at first. Just until the kids were older. Just until we had more savings. Just for now. But the years slipped by, and those compromises became my everyday life. My coworkers thought I had it all figured out. Daniel's living the dream, they'd say at company parties, lifting their glasses toward me. Great family, beautiful house, and he gets paid to play in the dirt. They'd laugh. I'd laugh too. All while ignoring the empty feeling that kept growing inside me year after year. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent my days building perfect outdoor spaces for other people, while my own life felt quietly broken. I started coming home later and later, finding excuses to stay at the office or check job sites after hours. Looking back now, I can see it clearly, I was already running away. I just hadn't gone very far yet. Margaret and I met 20 years ago, back when I was a ranger at Yellowstone National Park. She showed up with a group of ecology students doing summer field research. I was leading a tour, explaining how the park's ecosystem worked, when I noticed this red-haired woman asking smart questions and writing down everything I said. There was a fire in her eyes when she talked about conservation. A kind of passion that lit something inside me. That night, I invited her for coffee at the ranger cabin. We talked until sunrise. I still remember the morning light pouring through the windows, turning everything gold, catching the freckles on her face. She told me about her dream of becoming an environmental consultant, of helping companies shrink their environmental footprint instead of expanding it. I told her about my love for the wilderness. About how I believed people needed real, untamed nature in their lives to feel whole. It felt like we'd found a mirror in each other, someone who understood that humans were just one small piece of a much bigger, connected world. After she finished school, Margaret moved in with me. We lived right there in the park, in a small staff cabin. Those years were the happiest of my life. We woke up to birdsong, spent our days hiking, and sat by the fire at night talking about everything and nothing. We shared an intimate moment under the open sky. We planned a future built around protecting the natural world we both cared about so deeply. Then the kids came and everything shifted. Our son, Owen, was born with severe asthma. The doctors told us we needed to move closer to a city with better medical care. That's when I walked away from the job I loved, for my family. I still remember packing up the cabin. Margaret stood there holding baby Owen, wrapped tight in a blanket. Neither of us said much. We just tried not to cry as we drove away from the life we'd built. My father helped us with the down payment on a house in the Portland suburbs. I enrolled in landscape design courses and eventually landed a job at Green Vista. Margaret put her career on hold to take care of Owen. At first, we told ourselves it was temporary. But the years rolled on. The kids grew. And I sank deeper into suburban routine. Owen is 16 now, his asthma managed with medication. Our daughter, Claire, is 14, a gifted artist with her mother's red hair and my love for the outdoors. Margaret eventually went back to work and became a successful environmental consultant, advising big corporations on how to make their projects look greener. She's a great mother. And until that night in the hallway, I truly believe she was a happy wife too. Over the last few years, the space between Margaret and me had been slowly widening, even if neither of us said it out loud. It didn't happen all at once. It crept in through small, almost invisible changes. The easy conversations we used to have dried up. Talking to each other started to feel stiff and routine, like we were checking boxes instead of actually connecting. How was your day? Fine. Busy. Yours? Same. That was usually where it ended. We stopped sharing the little things, the small wins, the annoyances, the thoughts that usually glue a couple together. Our sex life followed the same quiet decline. What used to be regular became occasional, then rare, and eventually almost non-existent. I honestly couldn't remember the last time we truly made love instead of just going through the motions. I kept telling myself this was normal. Long marriages went through dry spells. That's what everyone said. We were both exhausted. Careers, teenagers, schedules, responsibilities, it all added up. Still, deep down, I knew the truth. Something essential between us had shifted, and no amount of rationalizing could explain it away. The woman I'd fallen in love with, vibrant, curious, full of fire, seemed to have faded into someone quieter, someone who moved through our shared life with a kind of tired acceptance. And if I was being honest, I wasn't the same man either. The idealistic park ranger who once knew every plant and animal by heart had turned into a guy who designed sterile, controlled landscapes for people who treated nature like a decoration. I'd put on weight, not a lot, but enough that my work shirts pulled tight at the buttons. The hiking boots I used to wear daily sat untouched in a closet, replaced by loafers that never met dirt or gravel. Even my laugh had changed. It came out shorter now, softer, like I was afraid of taking up too much space. I told myself it was just a phase. Teenagers. Career stress. Mortgage payments. Life. That explanation held up until it didn't. Then came that Tuesday. May 27th. An ordinary day that quietly split my life in two. A client meeting got cancelled, and I headed home early, thinking I'd spend some time in the backyard. I'd been planning a small native plant garden, a personal project, really. A way to reconnect with the part of myself I felt slipping away. I forgot my keys and let myself in through the side door with the spare, thinking I'd surprise Margaret. Instead, I overheard her phone call with Helen. After those words left her mouth, it felt like all the air was sucked out of my lungs. The house I'd lived in for 15 years suddenly felt foreign, almost hostile. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't think there. So I left. I drove for hours with no real direction until I ended up at a gas station off the highway. My phone kept buzzing in my pocket. Texts, missed calls, probably Margaret asking where I was, why I wasn't answering. I couldn't bring myself to look. Inside the station, I bought a cheap notebook and a pen. I sat in my car and tried to make sense of everything I'd heard. Had I really become that unbearable? I forced myself to see things through Margaret's eyes. The complaints she mentioned, were they real? I replayed our recent conversations. How many started with me grumbling about clients, traffic, neighbors? How often had I actually asked her about her day and truly listened? The realization landed hard, like a punch to the chest. Somewhere along the way, I'd lost the man I used to be. And maybe we'd lost each other too. I wrote a short letter. Margaret. I need time to think about our life. Don't worry about me. Take care of the kids. There's enough money in the account for monthly expenses. Daniel. That was it. I paid the gas station clerk $20 to mail it. Then I pulled cash from the ATM, not everything, just my share of our savings. I turned off my phone and started driving north. There was no plan. No packed bag. No roadmap for what came next. I was running on pure instinct, pushed forward by a pain so sharp I couldn't think past it. As the miles rolled by, the scenery shifted from city sprawl to open farmland to thick forest, and with every change, it felt like layers were peeling off me. Underneath, something raw and real started to surface. That night, I stopped at a roadside motel with flickering neon and rooms that were clean but stuck in another decade. Lying on the bed, staring at water stains on the ceiling, I questioned everything. Was this a midlife crisis? A breakdown? Or something necessary, a rupture that had been building for years? I hadn't planned on going to Yellowstone. But as I studied the road atlas I'd bought at a truck stop, with my phone still shut off and hidden in the glove compartment, it became obvious. There was only one place that made sense. Not home. Not Portland. The place where I'd last felt alive. 2 days later, I was standing in front of the park's administrative building. It was surreal, like the last 15 years had simply evaporated. Yellowstone looked the same. And that was the thing about nature, it ran on a clock far older than human lives. The mountains stood exactly as they always had. Geysers erupted on their ancient schedules. Animals followed migration paths older than memory. There was comfort in that, knowing some things stayed untouched by personal failures and emotional wreckage. My old boss, Thomas Reed, was still there. He had to be over 60 now, but he looked solid as ever. His skin was tanned and weathered from decades outside, his grip firm when he shook my hand. Daniel Whitmore, he said, pulling me into a crushing bear hug. What the hell are you doing here? You look like you've seen a ghost. Maybe I had. Maybe I was staring at the ghost of the man I used to be before compromises and comforts sanded him down. I didn't want to lie to Thomas, but I couldn't tell him everything either. I said I needed a break. Time to rethink my life. Thomas didn't push. He just studied me, the clothes that didn't quite fit the setting, the hands that had gone soft, the tired look I couldn't hide. After a moment, he nodded. You know, he said, we could use someone up north. Temporary gig. Summer season. The cabin's old, Thomas said, but the roof doesn't leak. You'll patrol routes and give tours for visitors, just like you used to. It sounded almost too easy. I wondered if a person could really step back into a former life the way you step into an old jacket. Part of me didn't believe it. A bigger part needed to believe it was possible. That same afternoon, I filled out the paperwork and was handed a ranger uniform. It looked nearly identical to the one I'd turned in 15 years earlier, except for a new logo stitched onto the sleeve. When I put it on in the staff bathroom and caught my reflection in the mirror, it stopped me cold. Something shifted the moment the fabric settled on my shoulders. My back straightened. My chin lifted. For the first time in years, I met my own gaze without flinching or looking away. The northern sector of Yellowstone is one of the quietest parts of the park. My assigned cabin sat on a hill above a small lake so clear you could see pebbles scattered along the bottom near the shore. The closest neighbor, Ranger Aaron, lived 5 miles away. It was the perfect place for someone trying to disappear without completely vanishing. The cabin itself was simple and worn but solid. One main room with a wood stove, a small kitchen, a bedroom, and a bathroom with a shower that only worked properly if you treated the ancient water heater gently and waited your turn. The furniture was plain but dependable: a bed, a table, a couple of chairs, shelves filled with field guides and old park history books. No television. No internet. Barely any cell service. Just quiet, forest, and sky. The first few days were brutal. I'd wake up in the middle of the night with my heart pounding, sweat soaking through the sheets. What had I done? Were the kids okay? Was Margaret searching for me? Had I completely lost my mind? The questions circled endlessly, like scavengers, stealing any chance of rest. But slowly, the park began to work its way into me. I started waking with the sun. I made coffee on the wood stove. I stepped outside and watched morning mist lift off the lake. I patrolled trails, checked conditions, logged wildlife sightings, and guided the handful of tourists who wandered this far north. I watched their faces light up with wonder, the same way mine used to when this place was still new to me. The physical work was tough after years behind a desk. My muscles protested. My skin burned, then darkened. My hands, once soft, grew rough again. Calluses formed. And with each passing day, I felt more grounded. Stronger. More awake inside my own body. More connected to the land beneath my boots. After about a week, I drove into the small town outside the park and bought a laptop and a satellite modem, the only way to get online in a place like this. The first thing I checked was our bank account. Margaret hadn't touched the money I'd left. That comforted me and worried me at the same time. Was she managing okay? Had she gotten my letter? Was she searching for me? I couldn't bring myself to check my email or social media. I wasn't ready to face the trail I'd left behind, the panic, the confusion, the anger that was probably waiting there. Instead, I started something new. I created a blog and called it Voice of the Wild. I wrote about my days without naming names or explaining why I was here. I wrote about sunrises over the lake. About a moose family that came down to drink each morning. About stars so bright you forget the sky ever belonged to the city. Writing had never been my thing. But here, surrounded by everything I loved, the words came easily. I described how light danced across water, the exact green that appears in spring leaves, the way silence in the wilderness isn't empty at all, it's layered, alive, full of subtle sound. I wrote about the satisfaction of real work. About coffee brewed on a wood stove. About sitting on the porch, watching thunderstorms roll through the valley, safe and small beneath something vast. At first, I assumed no one was reading. It felt like a private journal posted into the void. Then, a couple of weeks in, I noticed comments. People shared the posts. They wrote about their own lives, asked questions, thanked me. One comment stayed with me. Your words remind me that somewhere out there, a real world still exists, untouched by the rush of modern life. Thank you for reminding us. I started taking photos and adding them to the posts. The audience grew slowly but steadily. Voice of the Wild turned into a small, thoughtful community of people craving simplicity and connection. I made sure never to show my face. I never used my real name. To the readers, I was just Ranger D, a voice sending quiet observations from deep in the wilderness. In mid-June, a package arrived from Thomas. Inside was a satellite phone and a short note. For emergencies. And, your wife called the main office. Twice. I didn't tell her anything. But you should think about it, son. I stared at the note for a long time. Guilt twisted in my chest, mixed with fear. Margaret was looking for me. Of course she was. But I still wasn't ready to talk. I didn't know what I'd say. Sorry I disappeared, but I heard you tell someone you couldn't stand me anymore. Just imagining that conversation made my body tense with pain. So I threw myself deeper into the work. I extended my patrol routes. Restored old trail signs. Created a new tour program focused on how different species depended on one another, how nothing existed in isolation out here. Thomas noticed the effort. Before the end of the month, he offered me a permanent position for the following season. I didn't give him an answer. Still, the thought of staying brought an unexpected calm. On the blog, my writing changed too. It went deeper. More personal. I wrote about choices. About the quiet compromises people make for stability. About how easy it is to lose yourself while chasing what looks like a normal life. I never explained my situation directly. I didn't have to. People responded anyway. They shared their own stories. Their doubts. Their regrets. That ongoing conversation, those honest exchanges with strangers, became something I hadn't known I needed. A kind of therapy. One post, more than any other, seemed to strike a nerve with the people reading it. I wrote about what I called invisible thresholds, those quiet moments when you step from one stage of life into another without realizing it until you're already standing on the far side. I wrote about how sometimes the only way to truly see your life is to step away from it. How distance can offer clarity that closeness never allows. The comments section filled quickly. People shared stories about the exact moment they realized they'd crossed one of those thresholds, when they woke up and barely recognized the person they'd become. And that's when a thought crept in that both unsettled and fascinated me. Was Margaret reading this? If she was, would she recognize my voice in the words? Would she understand what I was struggling to put into language, even for myself? By July, the park was swarming with tourists. The northern sector was still quieter than most areas, but my tours became more frequent. One afternoon, I was guiding a group of 12 people along a narrow wooded trail leading to a lesser-known geyser. The path forced us into single-file in spots, so I kept the pace slow and steady, making sure no one was left behind. That's when I noticed her. A young woman with bright red hair, almost identical to Margaret's when she was younger. The sight of it sent a sharp ache through my chest. For a split second, an irrational thought flashed through my mind: she found me. But no. This woman was younger. Different face. Different presence. Still, the resemblance was strong enough that I avoided her gaze, afraid the emotions on my face would give me away. During the tour, she asked thoughtful questions about the ecosystem and took photos non-stop. Every time I talked about conservation work or environmental protection, she leaned in, fully engaged. There was something familiar in her curiosity, her sincerity. It stirred memories I wasn't prepared to face. After the tour ended and the rest of the group wandered off toward the geyser basin, she approached me. "This might sound strange," she said carefully, "but are you Daniel Whitmore?" My heart stopped. "Yes," I said. "That's me." Her eyes widened. "Do we know each other?" "Not really," she replied. "I'm Natalie. Margaret's niece. She showed me your wedding photos." The world tilted. "You disappeared a few months ago," she continued. "Aunt Margaret's been trying to find you." I didn't know what to say. Margaret had never mentioned a niece named Natalie, but then again, we hadn't been close to her side of the family in years. The distance started after a falling out between Margaret and her sister over their mother's care. Over time, that gap had just become part of life. Another broken connection I'd quietly accepted. "How is she?" I finally asked, my voice barely audible. "Devastated," Natalie said. "At first, everyone thought something terrible had happened to you. Then your letter arrived, and she calmed down a little. But she's still searching. She doesn't understand why you left." I exhaled slowly. "It's complicated," I said. I overheard something that made me think she'd be better off without me. Natalie frowned. What did you hear? I came home early, I said. I heard her on the phone saying she couldn't stand me anymore. That it was impossible. Natalie's confusion turned into shock, then something else. Recognition. Oh my God, she said, shaking her head. Daniel, she was talking about a client. The words didn't register at first. A client? I repeated. Yes, Natalie said. A developer. A nightmare. He kept changing the project and blaming her for everything. He made her cry more than once. She was even thinking about quitting because of him. The ground shifted beneath me. All this time, I thought she was talking about me. About us. About our marriage. But she said she thought she could handle it, I said. That it was impossible. Like she was trying to save something. She was talking about the project, Natalie said gently. He wanted to build a shopping mall in a protected conservation area. Margaret thought she could convince him to change his plans. He refused. Completely. I sat down on the nearest rock, my legs suddenly weak. Had my entire escape been built on a single, devastating misunderstanding? For 3 months, I'd been hiding in the wilderness, convinced I was freeing Margaret from me when in reality. Does she know you're here? I asked quietly. No, Natalie said. I'm here with friends on a national parks trip. I had no idea you were a ranger. Ending up on your tour was pure coincidence. I pulled out my notebook and started writing without thinking. Natalie watched me, her expression shifting again. Wait, she said. You run the Voice of the Wild blog, don't you? I froze. Aunt Margaret reads it every day, she continued. She showed me your latest post before this trip. She says it reminds her of you. Of your time together here. My hand tightened around the pen. She reads it? I asked. Yes. She doesn't know it's you. But she says she feels a strange connection to the writer. I finished the note and handed it to Natalie. Please give this to Margaret when you get back, I said. And please don't tell her you saw me. I'll reach out myself. Natalie hesitated. Are you sure? She misses you more than you think. I nodded, my throat thick. I just need a little more time. The next morning, the sky was heavy with dark clouds. The forecast warned of a severe storm. I called Aaron to see if he needed help clearing campers from the area, but he said he had it covered. I spent the morning rereading my old blog posts, trying to experience them the way Margaret might. Had she sensed it was me? Had she heard my voice in the way I described the land, the quiet, the longing? The storm hit around noon, harder than expected. Lightning tore across the sky. Thunder rolled through the mountains. I checked in to make sure all the tourists from my earlier group had returned safely to the visitor center. Seeing their names checked off brought a wave of relief. Around 3 in the afternoon, the satellite phone rang. It was Aaron. His voice barely cut through the roar of rain and wind. Daniel, we've got a situation, Aaron said over the satellite phone. 5 tourists didn't make it back from the Blue Lake Trail. They were last seen near the trailhead this morning. How many are searching? I asked. 3 of us, including me. We could really use you, especially with your knowledge of the northern sector. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed rescue gear and headed straight for the checkpoint where the others were waiting. Rain was coming down in sheets, pounding the ground so hard it bounced back up. Visibility was awful, about as bad as it gets for a search operation. From the checkpoint, we split up to cover more ground. I was assigned the hardest section, the steep eastern approach to the lake. I moved slowly and deliberately, scanning every ravine, every cluster of rocks that could offer shelter. Around 5 in the afternoon, I heard it, a faint cry, barely cutting through the storm. It came from a ravine just off the main trail. I eased my way down the slope, slick with rain and mud, and found them. 3 adults. Two teenagers. All huddled beneath a rock overhang. One woman was gripping her leg, twisted at an unnatural angle. Park ranger. I called out. Is everyone okay? Thank God, one of the men said, his voice shaking. Victoria broke her leg trying to get down here. We've been stuck for hours. I radioed the others immediately, then focused on the group. Victoria needed medical attention fast. The rest were soaked, cold, and exhausted, but otherwise unharmed. The bigger problem was the stream we had to cross to get back. The water level was rising fast. If we waited too long, it would become impassable and we'd be spending the night out here in the storm. I made the call. Here's the plan, I said. I'll make a stretcher for Victoria. We move now. Using my backpack and the tourists' jackets, I rigged a makeshift stretcher. We moved slowly but steadily, fighting rain and fatigue every step of the way. By the time we reached the stream, it had turned into a roaring torrent. I tied everyone together with a safety rope and took the lead, hoisting the stretcher onto my shoulders. The water surged up to my waist, the current brutal and unforgiving. Halfway across, one of the teenagers lost their footing. The rope snapped tight. The force yanked my feet off the ground. Instinct took over. I grabbed a thick branch from a fallen tree just as the current tried to pull us downstream. Hold the rope! I yelled. What followed was chaos, water slamming into us, wind screaming through the trees, my muscles burning as I fought to keep everyone upright. Somehow, through effort, luck, and stubborn refusal to let go, we made it to the far bank. Everyone was drenched, shaking, but alive. Aaron and the other rangers met us near the main trail with proper stretchers and dry clothes. When we finally reached the visitor center, a doctor was already waiting for Victoria. I sat in the corner afterward, wrapped around a cup of hot tea, trembling from cold and adrenaline. That's when I saw the red hair. Natalie walked toward me, her face serious. I gave your note to Aunt Margaret, she said softly. She flew in this morning. My heart stopped. She's here? I asked. At the hotel near the southern entrance. She didn't know where to find you, but hoped the park service could help. At that exact moment, the visitor center doors opened. Margaret stepped inside. Her hair was wet from the rain. Her eyes scanned the room frantically until they landed on me. Time froze. She walked toward me slowly, like I might vanish if she moved too fast. I stood up, my legs shaking, this time not from cold. Daniel, she said. Just my name. But inside it was pain, relief, love, all of it crashing together. My eyes filled instantly. Margaret. I misunderstood everything. I thought. She shook her head and wrapped her arms around me, holding on like she'd never let go again. Her tears mixed with rain on my face. I knew it was you, she whispered. The blog. No one else could write about this place like that. I felt you in every word. I hugged her back, something cracked and broken inside me finally starting to mend. He saved the tourists during the storm, Natalie said, stepping closer. He's a hero. Margaret pulled back just enough to look at me. You've always been a hero, Daniel, she said. You just forgot sometimes. That night, we talked for hours in my small ranger cabin. About the misunderstanding that sent me running. About her nightmare developer client. About how she'd stumbled onto my blog while searching Yellowstone information for Natalie and immediately recognized the voice behind the words. I couldn't be sure, she said, staring into the fire. But something told me. And when Natalie gave me your note, I knew. I'm so sorry, I said. I acted like an idiot. I should have talked to you instead of disappearing. And I'm sorry you overheard that call, she replied. I never meant you. I never couldn't stand you. She paused. I miss the Daniel you were here. Alive. Passionate. Real. I nodded. I miss him too. Somewhere along the way, I lost myself. I became what I thought I was supposed to be: successful, dependable, responsible. And I forgot who I actually was. She smiled gently. So who are you really, Daniel Whitmore? For the first time in months, I smiled too. I'm someone who loves wild places, space, freedom. Someone who writes from the heart and rescues lost tourists. And someone who still loves his wife deeply, even if he sometimes acts like an idiot. She squeezed my hand. You know the kids miss you too, she said. Claire says she won't forgive you unless you bring her a real Yellowstone pine cone. And Owen, he's stronger now. Owen's asthma barely troubles him anymore. The kids know where I am, well, sort of. I told them you took a long break to figure things out. They think I went to some ecology conference. I squeezed her hand. So what do we do now, Margaret? She studied me carefully before answering. That depends on you, Daniel. I don't want you going back to a life that makes you miserable. But I also don't want to lose you again. I stared out the window at the dark outlines of the trees, the stars scattered above them. Thomas offered me a permanent job here, I said. But I can't ask you and the kids to drop everything and move out here. What if I tell you that's exactly what I want? She asked softly. Owen's doing much better now. He's practically grown. Claire adapts wherever she lands. And me? She smiled faintly. I've always wanted to come back here, Daniel, to something real. Not that endless chase after success. I looked at her, stunned. You're serious? Completely, she said. I've even thought about starting my own consulting firm and working remotely. The internet here isn't great, but that can be fixed. I pulled her into a hug, feeling something warm and alive spreading through my chest. Margaret Whitmore, you're incredible. I don't deserve you. Yes, you do, she said firmly. We deserve to be happy together. Even if we lose our way sometimes, what matters is finding each other again. A year went by. Margaret and I sat on the porch of our new house, bigger and more comfortable than my old ranger cabin, but still inside park boundaries. Owen had started college in Montana, studying ecology like his mom. Claire finished school online and helped me with a new project: educational wildlife programs for kids. Margaret opened her consulting firm, focusing on environmentally responsible construction. I stayed on as a ranger and kept writing my blog, which somehow grew to thousands of readers. Sometimes I thought about how one misunderstanding nearly destroyed everything, and how getting lost ended up leading me back to myself. Margaret stepped onto the porch with 2 mugs of coffee and sat beside me. We watched the sun rise over the lake, turning the sky pink and gold. What are you thinking about? She asked, threading her fingers through mine. About how happy I am, I said. And how the best things often come after the hardest moments. She smiled and rested her head on my shoulder. You know, I never stopped looking for you, even when I didn't know where you were. I kissed her temple, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. And I never stopped loving you, even when I thought I'd lost you. But that wasn't the end of the story. 3 months after we reunited, a letter arrived. The developer Margaret had worked with, the one whose behavior had unknowingly set all this in motion, was suing her for breach of contract. After she left to find me, her firm reassigned the project, and things fell apart. This is insane, I said, skimming the legal language. He can't actually win this. Margaret wasn't so sure. He has money, Daniel. And influence. The lawsuit dragged on for months, hanging over our new life like a storm cloud. We had to travel back to Portland repeatedly for depositions and meetings. Every time, the city felt like it was closing in on me, trying to drag me back into the life I'd escaped. One night, after a brutal day with lawyers, Margaret and I were having dinner at our old favorite restaurant when a man approached our table. I recognized him instantly from her stories: Samuel Cole. Tall. Perfect suit. A smile that never reached his eyes. Well, he said. The disappearing husband and the consultant who walked away. Quite the couple. I started to stand, but Margaret placed her hand over mine, stopping me. "What do you want, Samuel?" she asked calmly. "Just saying hello," he replied smoothly. "To the pair who cost me millions. When this is over, I'll own that little consulting firm of yours. Maybe even that cozy cabin in the woods I've heard about." The way he said cabin sent a chill through me. "How do you know about that?" I snapped. "Have you been following us?" He laughed. "Let's call it due diligence. I like to know who I'm dealing with. For example, Daniel, I know all about your little disappearance. Running from your problems. Makes you wonder what the Park Service would think if they knew their ranger was unstable." Margaret's grip tightened, warning me. "Goodbye, Samuel," she said sharply. "We'll see you in court." He straightened his tie. "I'm sure you will. Enjoy dinner. It may be one of your last peaceful meals for a while." After he left, I noticed something drop from his pocket, a small black device sliding under a nearby table. I retrieved it and felt my stomach twist. "He was recording us," I whispered, showing Margaret. Her face drained of color. "That's illegal. We need to call our lawyer." We did. Our attorney was furious. "This changes everything," he said. "We can countersue for harassment and illegal surveillance." But Samuel Cole wasn't finished. Somehow he learned what we planned and doubled down. Anonymous comments appeared on my blog, exposing personal details only someone watching us could know. Then emails started reaching the park administration, questioning my mental stability, my reliability, my fitness for the job. One evening after my shift ended, I came back to the cabin and found Margaret sitting at the kitchen table, pale and motionless. "They froze my business accounts," she said quietly. "All of them." Cole convinced a judge I might be hiding money. For a split second, that old instinct kicked in, the urge to disappear, to run from the chaos. But then I looked at her, really looked at her, and remembered what it had taken me so long to learn. Running never fixes anything. It just leaves bigger wreckage behind. "We're going to fight this," I said, pulling out a chair beside her. "And we're doing it together." The weeks that followed blurred into a mix of lawyer meetings, document searches, late nights, and too little sleep. As we dug deeper, a disturbing pattern emerged. Cole had done this before: intimidation, harassment, legal pressure. He'd bullied other consultants and contractors into settling quietly, counting on his money to wear them down. Most had folded. Then came the turning point. A former employee of Cole contacted us after reading about the case in a professional forum. She brought evidence: emails, internal memos, recorded meetings. Proof that Cole had targeted Margaret's firm deliberately after she rejected his advances months earlier. "He does this," the woman told us during a video call. "He flirts, pushes boundaries. And when women say no, he destroys them professionally. I've seen it happen at least 5 times." With that evidence in hand, our lawyer's tone changed completely. "This isn't a simple contract dispute anymore," he said. "This is sexual harassment and retaliation. And there's a clear pattern." The day of the final hearing arrived. Margaret and I sat in the courtroom as Cole and his high-priced legal team shuffled papers with practiced confidence. But as our attorney laid out the evidence, and 3 other women testified with nearly identical stories, I watched Cole's smug expression begin to crack. The judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes and decades of experience, listened closely. At one point, she leaned forward. "Mr. Cole," she said, "I find these allegations deeply troubling." By the end of the day, the decision was unmistakable. Margaret's contract termination was ruled justified. Cole was ordered to pay damages and cover legal fees. And the judge referred the case to the district attorney for potential criminal charges related to illegal surveillance. As we walked out of the courthouse, Margaret squeezed my hand. "It's over," she whispered. I knew better. For us, yes. But not for Cole. Outside, reporters surrounded him, cameras flashing as his carefully built image began to collapse in public view. The empire he'd constructed through fear and intimidation was finally being exposed. That night, back in Yellowstone, we sat on the porch under a sky full of stars. We were drained emotionally, financially, but stronger than we'd ever been. You know what's ironic? Margaret said, resting against me. If I hadn't complained about Cole on that phone call, you wouldn't have left. I wouldn't have found your blog. And we wouldn't be here now, living this life. I laughed softly. And if I hadn't overheard you and jumped to the wrong conclusion, Cole might still be getting away with it. I pulled her closer. So that misunderstanding led to something good. More than good, she said. It led us back to who we really are. The year that followed changed everything. Margaret's firm flourished as she became known for standing her ground. My blog turned into a book deal about rediscovering authenticity in a world obsessed with appearances. Owen graduated with honors and joined an environmental protection agency. Claire chose a college near Yellowstone to study wildlife photography. And Samuel Cole? His empire didn't survive the scandal. More women came forward. Investors walked away. Projects collapsed. His reputation never recovered. The last we heard, he'd moved to another state, trying to start over, hopefully having learned something about consequences and respect. Sometimes life's hardest moments arrive disguised as mistakes or misunderstandings. For us, one painful misunderstanding became the spark that led us back to what truly mattered, not status, not success, not the illusion of a perfect life, but real connection. As I write this final entry, Margaret is by the lake, photographing a moose and her calves in the morning light. And I'm grateful for the pain, the loss, even that terrible moment when I overheard her words and got everything wrong. Because sometimes you have to lose your way completely to find the path that was always meant for you.